A very warm welcome, sir. A very, very warm welcome to GSIS family. I'm sure all are happy to see you here. Abhishek,
Yes, sir. Should I begin?
we're about to start. Anyone left here? All are in here? All the best to all of you present here. Do your best. Abhishek, over to the MC of the show, Abhishek Krishnan.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to everyone and a warm welcome to the closing ceremony of the Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020. To start off, I would like to call upon the Secretary General, Master Devik Satisha, to address us all.
A 9-year-old girl named Mora said, "I'd rather have peace on earth than pieces of earth." Good evening to all present here. Human crises are infinite. There is unending human suffering, economic distress. Our communities have changed. People are facing unforeseen levels of afflictions. The human fabric is torn asunder, but these just form a mere fraction of the crisis which calls upon solidarity, and that is where the Good Shepherd Model United Nations steps in. With over 200 young minds in 7 different committees, we have brought forth distinguished resolutions for issues ranging from the territorial disputes between India and China at Ladakh in the Special Political and Decolonization Committee to international measures for preventing further global financial crisis in the Economic and Financial Affairs Council. Entropy is permanent. Chaos will prevail and surge, as pointed out by the great British scientist Arthur Eddington. The Pandora's box can never be shut. The UN may seem a doubling of conflicts than what it is seeing today, but let us not forget the words of Steven Pinker. I quote, "The ultimate purpose of life, mind, and human striving is to deploy energy and information to fight back the tide of entropy." I unquote. According to Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli intellectual, humans have the capacity to cooperate in thousands and millions, which gives us remarkable capacities, and we have to use platforms such as the MUN to channel the power of humanity in order to shape a prosperous future. And with that in mind, our team, even during these trying times, put in all its efforts to make this virtual conference possible, unlike any other previous conferences. Multiple resolutions for each issue were presented, discourses ranging from the most specific to those encompassing multiple connections were used to resolve the problem. Oppositely, only the most relevant and unique solutions were passed with majority vote, which was the case with many of the resolutions undertaken by the committees. Over the last 2 days, from what I've seen in the sessions and heard from my colleagues, I realized that these young minds are not just the future of tomorrow, but very much the voice of today. The influence the world has on the youth is so remarkable that we often undermine the knowledge and understanding about how the world works. The quality of the debates were exceptionally premier, which had a proportional impact on the quality of the resolutions. We all are here on this day to represent our countries, push ourselves into debates, and pass good resolutions. This is our success. But it is at this moment that we should appreciate the time taken to achieve this success. It's human nature at times to entirely forget what lies beyond the tip of the iceberg. It is the part which we often don't see, the shadowy domain, and that is the learning and progress. That is both the genesis and the counterpart of a global conference. The preparation for GSMUN 2020 began just 2 weeks ago, and within that time span, our team has achieved success in attaining its goal. The success we taste today is all because of the time each individual has invested in making this happen. It is because we have valued the experiences and learned from them. But having said this, it is not ended here, delegates. Our generation is still going to have to deal with several imminent threatening crises. I, as much as anyone else, realize that I still have a lot to learn about the world. What will the world throw at our generation? That is why I would like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you, as an epiphany dawns on me that in these 2 days, I have learned more than I ever would in such a short span of time. Many of you have also carried out valuable support functions, writing articles, managing the production and layouts of brochures, websites, and exceptional MUN Gazette. All these will serve as wonderful reminders of our unique experience at the virtual Good Shepherd Model United Nations. Finally, I would like to convey my extreme gratitude to the authorities for giving me the opportunity to showcase my strengths at such a platform. As long as we know that we humans share a future together, nothing can stop us from unity and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Devik. I would now like to invite the heads of each committee to enlighten us on the workings of their respective committees over the past few days and present their reports to us. At the outset, I invite the Chair of the Economic and Financial Council, Harshul Ashish Amin.
We don't have to sacrifice a strong economy for a healthy environment. Denise Weaver. The Model United Nations has been one of the very few events of our school that has inspired me right since grade 4. It was the idea of debating and representing a country we may have never visited that really spurred me. It is almost like brewing a potion where countless ideas are thrown together to achieve perfection, something that isn't common and feasible in the current world. Not to forget the leaders, both past and present, who battled a sea of opposition with undying passion and fluency in their debates to ensure that justice and equity reaches everyone. It has been my dream to sit on the chair right in front and scan my delegates.
Harshal, can you put a camera on, please? Sorry.
So my
Your camera.
camera's on. It's on.
Okay. Sorry.
That will be tackled by the committee and how well they would execute the responsibilities. The responsibility to chair ECOFIN has been a challenging experience, considering the fact that finance or economics is not my cup of tea yet. Yet, over the past few weeks, the globe has appeared to me as it never was before. My idea of it had been but a mere hologram of the world, while we are all connected to each other by the intricate networks of finance and economics. A forensic analysis of the topics dealt by a committee has revealed that financial institutions are susceptible to flaws, and if left unchecked, global crisis would be imminent. Well, now, coming back to the committee, it was quite a marvel watching delegates who would shroud themselves in silence rage around the final days to convey their ideas. The delegates of Palestine and USA seemed to be in a typical war zone, holding words against each other's throats. The delegate of France and his usual forgetfulness, which would spur up heated conflicts subconsciously. I would like to commend the delegate of China for his novel ability to convince the whole committee to pass his resolution unanimously. In the final crisis, delegates and the co-chair of the committee came across peculiar ideas on the functioning of airplanes. My fierce fellow delegates, hats off to all of you. Even though you were encumbered by the brutal constraints of the new online MUN, you broke free of these shackles in order to produce something beyond anyone's expectations. Delegates, no matter what the result is, what you've gained through the way is what truly matters. It was truly an experience of a lifetime, and it couldn't have been possible without all of you, especially without the support of Meet Dubaria, my co-chair. The symposium has released the dormant seal that caged your individuality, and you can now make the world a better place. You have a quanta of philanthropic energy in you to bring about a change in the world, to not squander it. The motion to adjourn debate is now in order, delegates. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshul. Next, we have Hariyan Nagesh, the head of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee.
GSMUN, a colosseum where gladiators, all formally dressed with their country's placards, have rift of wit, jousting the sharp spears of sugar-coated objections against each other. Ha! Marvelous sight indeed. To such intellects, armed with intricate knowledge which puts our rabble-rousing ministers to shame. I feel nothing but pride to witness the intellectual combats of these champions. To peer down at this magnificent battle of words and gladiators unleashing their latent vice spirits is invigorating. The battle of words could never have been more tempting, and this war was unlike any other. When one claimed the laurel, everyone was rewarded. The only difference in this war was that knives were replaced with words and the blood with verbal kinesthetics. 3 long years I looked upon being in the thick of it, never knowing I will one day be heading such an enthusiastic set. Good afternoon, respected chief guests, teachers, secretary general, deputy general, heads, co-heads, and delegates. I, Hariyan Nagesh, stand here today as the head of Special Political and Decolonization Committee, SPECPOL, to recapitulate the memorable experiences that we've had yesterday and today. 2 days of intense verbal sparring between formidable delegates, each representing a million or so voices of their countrymen, which cannot be succinctly captured in a 3 minutes closing speech. I have seen my peers draft resolutions, counter-check the dossier of facts over again, which indicated their commitment to how they approached the assigned roles as delegates. They went from juggling the inhibitions to speak to juggling deadlines within a short span of few weeks. 2 days, within a short span of 2 weeks. 2 days of capstone resolutions from the delegate of China and Russia made us once again believe in the power of youth. Let us not forget how the journey of GSMUN 2020 began on 21st September, when each one of these delegates entered the virtual Colosseum with hesitation etched on the faces. Slowly but surely, the passion for the topics related to politics and space helped them crystallize and form the positions worthy of an MUN debate. The delegate of Pakistan did not fail to make his presence felt through his idiosyncratic dance moves and bewildering the committee with random mutterings. The delegate of India and the delegate of North Korea formed alliances, much to the amazement of the chair and the co-chair. Amongst the 4 resolutions presented, only the crisis, as all my delegates were there and had beautiful solutions to it. I would like to thank possible without each one of the delegates or the teachers, and particularly supporting co-head Kashika Gulabani. I began my speech by alluding to the Roman Colosseum, and I stand by it today. As we know, we are no longer engaged in a royal blood sport. The UN powers that can destabilize the world. So, all and GSMUN 2020. Thank you all, and over and out. Thank you.
Thank you, Hariyan. Next, we have the head of the Youth Assembly, Ravina Jevan Patil.
Over the previous decade, over 21,000 innocent lives were lost to terrorism. Nothing ever before has put forth a test for humanity the way terrorism has. History is witness to the shockingly vile methods that terrorists use to spread an atmosphere of turmoil. These acts not only cause distress, but also make us question the evil humans are truly capable of. While we whine about not being able to meet our friends and go outside to hotels and malls, GSMUN has really helped us all take a step back and contemplate how fortunate we are to be still able to continue our lives of luxury while the rest of the world suffers from hunger, poverty, diseases, unemployment, and deteriorating physical and mental health. People now feel more isolated than ever before. Escaping misery is now harder than ever. Our only way to connect with others is now social media. However, a plague called infodemic that is spreading much faster than the virus itself threatens the idea of reality for every individual. These problems may seem almost impossible to tackle, but the delegates of Youth Assembly did not fail to demonstrate how communication, collaboration, and compromise can overcome even the trickiest of issues. Good evening, respected Chief Guest Mr. Shabrinath Nair, teachers, Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General, heads, co-heads, and delegates. I feel truly honored to have had a chance to lead the GSMUN Youth Assembly 2020. Youth Assembly started off with the main aim of coming up with effective and realistic solutions to the problems that haunt our world today. I feel glad to see the flexibility in adapting to the needs of the virtual MUN platform. After extremely heated discussions and close evaluation of the resolutions by the delegates, 3 resolutions managed to pass, while one was not so fortunate this year. I can proudly say that our aim to provide a platform for young leaders of tomorrow was successful. I witnessed innovators, both creative and critical thinkers, engage in really effective and thought-provoking debates. While it took a lot of time and effort to get my shy delegates to get their cameras on, the ideas definitely managed to surpass our expectations. I would like to thank the co-head of Youth Assembly, Christian, for helping me manage the committee and supporting me at every step. I would like to thank the teachers for their constant support and input for improvement. Without their creative strategies to attract delegates into the committees, it would have been impossible to have more than 2 delegates showing up for the sessions. Last but not the least, I would like to thank Dominic sir for providing me this opportunity. While we may think this virtual platform has taken away the real feel of GSMUN, how can the fact that each of us have developed lifelong solidarity be overlooked? Signing off, Head of GSMUN Youth Assembly 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravina. Next, we have the head of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Denise D'Souza.
Good evening, respected Chief Guests, teachers, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, and GSMUN core team and delegates. As the head of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, I believe it is my duty to discuss with you all the contents and outcome of the past sessions, ranging from the past 2 days and the weeks before that. In our committee this year, we discussed the threat of organized crime and piracy near Latin American countries, and the prevention of an increase in trafficking in unauthorized medical products in rural and urban settings. Our first day began with the necessary procedures and protocols, and we began our meeting with clear-cut openings of each of the countries. After these preliminaries, we commenced a debate to facilitate the passing of a resolution of the country of El Salvador. Today, we dwelled into 2 resolutions of the countries of France and UK that resulted in the passing of UK's resolution and the passing of the resolution of France too. Having witnessed these delegates debate on numerous occasions, there was noticeable changes in the delegates and the committee as a whole. There were a few dilemmas the committee faced during practices, but an engagement with these dilemmas brought out the best in the committee and its fellow delegates. They tackled situations differently, adhered to the necessary procedures for a formal debate, spoke confidently, and were open to feedback and suggestions aimed at improving their skills. Aside from the fact that they all attained better improvement in their skills, there were certain delegates who made commendable efforts for the betterment of the committee, such as the delegate of France, followed by the delegates of USA and Russia. All the delegates brought out the best of the committee and really surprised me during the session where the crisis was presented. Hats off, delegates. To conclude, I would like to thank my co-chair for her excellent work and help throughout the sessions, and the teachers who stood by both the delegates and me and the GSMUN core team. Finally, I would like to thank those who offered this position to me and gave me the opportunity to put myself and my skills out. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Next, we have the head of Disarmament and International Security Council, Diansha Magesh.
2 days of heated debates over a week of dedicated research and a team of confident speakers. A very good afternoon to our chief guests, members of the Academic Council, teachers, fellow chair members, and dear delegates. The past few days as the chair of the first General Assembly, Disarmament and International Security, along with co-chair Adesh Kheria, is one experience that has evoked many skills in me I never knew I had. Delegates who are always ready to deal with all those fast increasing global issues and find solutions to maintain peace in the world is what DISEC expects. And needless to say, the 20 delegates of my committee have fulfilled their motives and goals. The two topics that our committee dealt with this year were the government's accountability of and responsibility with confiscated goods and foreign intervention in matters of international security. Irrespective of all the difficulties faced due to this event being an online one, I can proudly say that my team ensured that the committee procedures continued without any unnecessary interruptions. Firstly, I would like to congratulate all the delegates of the committee for making DISEC 2020 a grand success. It has been my honor to work with a team of dedicated delegates. Right from those nervous individuals to confident delegates, your journey has been a learning for me as well. The delegates of USA and Italy hardly stopped debating. It seemed as though their main motive was to go against each other in every possible way. The delegate of UK had to constantly be reminded to take prior permission of the chair before stating a point. The delegate of Syria and Pakistan had network issues all the time. It did annoy the chair as they left the meeting as soon as they were asked to speak. Resolutions passed, resolutions failed. But the fire in the delegates was the same. I would fail on my part if I do not thank my co-chair Adesh Kheria, who has always been there for the committee. Without his support, this committee wouldn't have been what it is now. Not to forget all the teachers who played a major role in encouraging all delegates and helping the committee in every way possible. To conclude, I would like to quote Joseph Joubert, a French novelist. It is better to debate a question without settling it than to settle a question without debating it. I, Diansha Magesh, would now like to sign off as the head of DISEC 2020. Delegates, the committee is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Diansha. Next, we have Kanupriya Winkle, the head of the United Nations Human Rights Council.
Respected President Mr. Jacob Thomas, Senior Vice President Mrs. Elsima Thomas, Principal Mrs. Sheila Alexander, coordinators, fellow delegates, teachers, and last but not the least, our chief guest, Mr. Shabrinath Nair. Today, I'm standing here to address this forum about debates that have taken place in the time span of 2 days, which in the end are sufficient to change the perspective of how one views the world. First of all, I would like to start with personally thanking all of you present here, but it won't be possible by acknowledging everyone in this committee. This is the time I can finally say that everyone in my committee has fulfilled their potentials by solving critical problems relating to increase in xenophobia and censorship through resolution papers. Some may view these solutions as idealistic and airy, but these are the solutions that are placed together by us, the youth of today. The committee's work was to seek different ways in order to curtail the spiraling nationalism which resulted in a negative impact known as xenophobia and the increase in control over one's freedom of expression. One can find this idea of ultranationalism in countries such as the USA, Colombia, Brazil, and Canada. Although we were quite worried about the participation of delegates due to their reluctance in opening up during mock sessions. But the enthusiasm for the main day led the delegates to thrive on new challenges and cause unexpected outcomes, thus finally delivering peace, security, and assurance. The committee session also contains sparks of humor, between the seriousness of debates with sarcastic comments about the tweets written by Mr. Donald Trump that elicited chuckles among the delegates during the unmoderate caucuses. It will be hard to miss out the continuous banter between the delegates of Iran and South Africa and the unconscious need of the delegate of the USA to raise his volume. In the end, it will be wrong on my part if I didn't mention the co-head, Nitya Dhanani, who has regularly aided me with the proceedings of the committee. I am constantly delighted by the level of debates and the skills of delegates showed. I can only feel optimism when we resume our daily classes next week that we get to manifest our takeaways from GSMUN in positive ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanupriya. Finally, we have the head of the Security Council, Rishabh Narayan Sutania.
I have always been fascinated by MUNs and fascinated by the youth who proudly call themselves delegates. I always used to wonder what it was like to represent a country. Although I pondered a lot about the committees and the various heads and co-heads, I was never perplexed about what it would be like to chair a committee. And here I am, chairing arguably the most important committee of the United Nations, the Security Council. Good afternoon to our esteemed chief guest, Mr. Shabarinath Nair, members of the Academic Council, respected teachers, fellow heads and co-heads, and dear delegates. I'm truly honored to be chairing a committee that holds primary responsibility under the United Nations Charter. The committee has focused on the two greatest issues that the world needs to pay attention to at the moment: maintaining peace and security in the Central African region and increased cyber threat given the increased number of online users over the pandemic. These topics have been in talk in today's world and require both active and out of the box thinking. All the delegates have progressed and grown into responsible individuals that have been creative as well as cooperative in the debate sessions. The Security Council is the only committee where veto powers are taken into account, hence placing a great weight on the delegates of countries with veto powers. But it would be unjust on my side if I didn't appreciate the efforts of all the delegates, not just the ones with the veto powers. The committee and the delegates have been ready and active in coming up with promising solutions and self sustainable ideas in order to improve the global crisis. The pandemic has not stopped the delegates from actively debating and making this year's MUN a resounding success. These sessions have been a roller coaster ride. The delegate of the Central African Republic never waited to be recognized, whereas the delegate of Iran didn't wish to be recognized. The delegates of Russia and Central African Republic always went to each other, whereas the delegates of Kazakhstan and China always had technical problems. Even though some resolutions failed, the delegates never lost interest and kept the spirit of the committee high. Overall, it was a fantastic experience which I would love to have again. The committee discussed three resolutions, out of which two of the resolutions passed and one failed. Lastly, I would like to thank all the members of the Academic Council and all those who thought of me as worthy for this position. I would also like to thank my co-head Rashi Kedia for always supporting me and the committee and also helping the committee move forth with debates and the sessions. This is the head of the Security Council signing off. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishabh. Now I would like to draw your attention to the GSMUN 2020 video presentation.
Vishal, is your video ready? Please present it. The IT team, if there's a snag with that, we can move on. Vishal, if there's any issue, we can just move on and come back.
Now, wasn't that a visual treat? I would now like to invite our school vice captain girls, Eve Saha of grade 12, to commence with the welcome address.
Good afternoon, respected Chief Guest, Mr. Shabrinath Nair, Senior Vice President, Mrs. Elsima Thomas, President, Mr. Jacob Thomas, Principal, Mrs. Sheila Alexander, the Academic Council members, parents, staff, and students. I welcome you all to the closing ceremony of the Good Shepherd Model United Nations 2020. It is my honor to introduce our esteemed chief guest, since he is a Shepherdian and a model for us seated here. Sir's career path proves that he is an illustrious and distinguished individual. I believe that your passion for the welfare of immigrant workers returning home due to the COVID pandemic speaks volume about your philanthropic personality. You have estimated in an interview that there are 164 million immigrant workers who deserve special services
from their home governments to seamlessly assimilate with the others, and that there should be an intergovernmental dialogue to blossom this change. Mr. Shabrinath Nair recently took up the position of Labour Migration Specialist for South Asia and is based in the ILO Decent Work Technical Support Team at New Delhi. His focal points are the 7 countries in the South Asia sub-region. Before joining the DWT, he was leading ILO's work on global migration policy with postings in both the ILO headquarters in Geneva and at the ILO office for the United Nations in New York. He oversaw affairs of Asia and the Middle East in the Labour Migration Branch. Prior to joining the ILO, Sir worked with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, Government of Switzerland, where he managed programs in 13 countries across Asia and represented Switzerland in regional intergovernmental dialogues on migration. He has previously worked with the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the International Organization for Migration, and the international NGOs. Sir has a double degree in Communication, Asian and International Studies from Griffith University in Australia, and an MA in International Relations from the Geneva School of Diplomacy and International Relations in Switzerland. Sir, a Shepherdian from the batch of 1998, was an active and proud Ottomite with the roll number 1613. He was given the leadership role of being the Autumn House captain, an excellent academic and public speaker. He was adjudged the best all-rounder of the 1998 batch. And now, I heartily welcome you to share your thoughts with our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. And now, for what we have all been looking forward to, I request our distinguished chief guest, Mr. Shabrinath Nair, to address us all.
Thank you very much. And Secretary General, if I may look up to you and go, can you hear me and can you see me? All clear?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Great. Thank you so much. Distinguished delegates, what an absolute pleasure it is to be amongst my, and I'll take off the word delegates and say, fellow Shepherdians. What a proud moment for all of you to have graduated from the 2020 Good Shepherd Model United Nations. There can be nothing more special than this moment. You know, for me, I must perhaps always start by thanking Ms. Elsama Thomas, who will always be my Secretary General in a way. So thank you, ma'am, for convening this on behalf of the school and for having me. And thank you, Ms. Sheila Alexander, the principal, at the time my biology teacher, for inviting me to this particular session and the closing of the 2020 GSMUN. I was so happy to hear from all of the delegates, particularly on ECOFIN, SECPOL, the Youth Assembly, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, DISEC, the Human Rights Council, and the Security Council. So to all of you, Harshul and Meeta, was it? Haryant and Kashika, Ravina, Denise, Diansha, and Adesh, Kanupriya, and Nitya, Rishabh and Rashi, congratulations to all of you for a great job done. You know, I've been wondering and I've been reflecting about where exactly we start and how I take this forward with regards to this conversation, I would like to say, with all of you. I don't want this to be a monologue, and I know that we will have an interactive session just as we finish. And I'm very happy to take questions and answers. So be prepared with your notepads, because the good idea or a good international civil servant will always carry a notepad with them. So don't hesitate to take notes. Very important, right? I'm going to come to you with a few stories that I have encountered in my own time with the international relations, in the international relations field, and specifically with the United Nations now. And I'm going to give you 4 names. One will be a non-name. So remember those names and remember how those names have influenced me, and perhaps you will be able to discover similar names for yourself as you grow, as you inspire yourself within the international civil service career, if you chose that as the option that you want to follow. The first name that I'd like to bring to your attention is Imran. Now, many of you would have, over the course of the last 2 days, may have heard if there was a delegate from Bangladesh. You may have heard from the delegate of Bangladesh or from anybody else about some of the biggest movements that we see in the world. And currently, one movement of people that we see in our own region in South Asia is the movement of the Rohingya refugees from Myanmar into Bangladesh. I had the opportunity during my posting in Bangladesh at the time with the Swiss government to spend time in the refugee camps, the Rohingya refugee camps. And those moments when you spend time with people so underprivileged, you begin to recognize that every little thing that you have is a blessing in disguise. So here I was in one of the camps, the refugee camps, in the Cox's Bazar district of Bangladesh, which now hosts, Bangladesh is currently the 5th largest host of refugees in the world. I was in the camp and I was in a group of UN officials from different UN organizations. There was the United Nations International Organization for Migration. There was the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. There was a number of government officials from the Bangladeshi government, including from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the ministries that dealt with law and order, police officials. So it was a big group of people who had gone to visit the camp. And while I was at the camp, a young man kept following this delegation. So when we walk in as a delegation of people, right? And we're trying to understand what the situation is in the camp. And this young man, Imran, he followed us and our delegation all through the camp. At one point, he came up to me. I was in a soap making factory within the camp. It's not a factory. It's a small soap making enterprise where refugee women learn how to make soap. And the very same soap is then distributed to the refugees for them to use, for them to take a bath with, for them to wash their clothes, wash their utensils. That is the same soap that they use. And this soap was produced within the camp. And while there, I was looking at the process of soap making, and Imran walked up to me, grabbed a bar of soap, gave it to me, and said, "Sir, why don't you smell the soap? It smells very nice." I smelt it. I did think, yes, it does smell very nice. You know, it's the kind of soap that you and I would use, right? You wouldn't really have much of a difference. I left it behind. But what I was struck by was the confidence that this young man showed when he walked up to me and said this to me in crystal clear English. Remember, this is a refugee camp. That is not the area where you expect refugees to speak English or a language that we are used to communicating in the way you and I would speak it. At one point, while Imran was following our delegation, I tapped him on his shoulder and I said, "Imran, tell me this, where did you learn to speak English the way you do? You were very confident when you approached me and you asked me to smell that bar of soap and said that it smells good." He said, "Sir, I learned it by listening to people like you." The first time I visited the camp was in 2015. The camp was established in 1991. Imran was all of 24 years old. He was born in that refugee camp. And he taught himself to speak English in a clear, legible manner because he learned to speak it by listening to people who visited the camp and who wanted to understand the plight of refugees. And the reason why I give you this story is because you have an education. I always attribute the education that was given to me by Good Shepherd. Not necessarily, yes, I'm thankful for all the degrees that I have got from different universities that Eve was kind enough to read out of that list. But I thank Good Shepherd for having built in me a good speaker and the ability to be able to communicate in an effective manner, if I can put it along those lines. And if that is the case, we should be grateful for what we have. Let us not forget the privileges that we are born with, some of us, and the privileges that we get in schools like Good Shepherd. And I wanted that idea to resonate with you so that you digest that and take it with you as you move out of the school, graduate, and grow in your chosen profession. The second name that I want you to remember is that of Fatima's. Now I'm moving on from refugee to a diplomat. Fatima was the first secretary, in fact still is, the first secretary of a country called Comoros. It's spelled C-O-M-O-R-O-S. Comoros is a small island country off the eastern coast of Africa. And Fatima was, at the time, this is when I was posted to the United Nations in New York with the International Labour Organization, Fatima was the first secretary of the government of Comoros as a delegate for Comoros at the United Nations in New York. I was in the middle of a negotiation that brought together 193 member states around the world. And Fatima was representing the Africa group. Now there are 54 countries in the continent of Africa, going all the way from Egypt and Morocco and Tunisia and Algeria in the north to South Africa in the south of the continent. And here was a lady, a young diplomat, the first secretary of a small island state of the eastern coast of the continent of Africa, representing the Africa group, representing 54 countries in the negotiations. And while we were there, I got to appreciate Fatima and what she brought to the table. But specifically here now, all of you during your last couple of days of engagement in the different committees, one of the things that you would have given yourself would have been a time limit. That time limit would have helped you in maintaining how long you should prepare your intervention for. I think I've already crossed my time limit. But here's my thing. Fatima was given 5 minutes to speak on behalf of the African group. The president of the negotiation, whoever was chairing, another government delegate, cut her off at the end of her 5 minutes and said, thank you to the distinguished delegate of Comoros representing the African group. Thank you very much. We would kindly request you to stop here because I need to move to the next delegate. And Fatima said, Mr. Chair, would you like me to speak for 10 minutes and finish my statement? Or would you like each one of my African member states to speak for 5 minutes? Immediately, till that moment, there was a timer that was kept at the back of the UN General Assembly. That timer was removed. The moment she said that, the distinguished delegate of China picked up the floor in what we call a right to reply. He picked up the floor and he said, we would like to hear every government, every representative say whatever they want to say, and no time limit should be put on their intervention. And she spoke, Fatima spoke for 10 minutes and finished speaking on behalf of 54 countries in the African group. But the reason why I give you that example is the power of unity, the power of the group, the singular power of coming together. Keep that in mind as you move forward. Nothing is possible without recognizing that you are a part of a broader community, that you will not be able to achieve anything on your own, that there are people, whether they are your teachers right now and whether they will be your co-workers later on, there are people who will help you move forward and take things forward. So remember the idea and the strength of a group. Remember the idea and the strength of multilateralism and of coming together, exactly what you have done over the last 2 days. My third story is about an unknown Indian diplomat. I will not give you her name. Let's just say her name starts with N. Now, because these are real life stories and I've not taken their permission to give you these stories, I would like to also retain this name. N was an Indian diplomat posted at the time in Geneva, where I was during my posting with the Swiss government. And at the time, we had a meeting, a whole group of people meeting with a special representative of the highest echelons of power within the United Nations. And this special representative, who's of a very high level, mentioned at this meeting, he said, I don't understand why there are all these low-level civil servants coming to these meetings. I don't understand why there are no ambassadors and decision makers at these meetings. I want to hear those people because we need to take decisions immediately and now. We don't have time to waste. There are people whose lives are at stake. There are migrants who are suffering right now as we speak. So we need to take quick decisions, and I cannot take unnecessary time with low-level civil servants. He said this, he stopped, he had presented a paper, and the government representative there had to reply with their government positions to his paper. So the first government representative, a good friend of mine, took the floor and said, thank you very much, Mr. So-and-so. I, as a low-level civil servant from such and such government, have this to present to you on behalf of my government. The second representative took the floor and said, like my friend, the low-level civil servant from this country, I, the low-level civil servant from my country, would like to present to you what my country has to say on your position paper. The third person who took the floor was the Indian diplomat N from the government of India. She took the floor and she said, thank you very much, sir. Here's the Indian position. She read out the Indian position and she then goes on to say, sir, I would just like to conclude by saying that today's low-level civil servants will be tomorrow's ambassadors. And the reason I give you this story is because I want you to recognize the importance of that person beneath you. That person who is not at your level, whether socially, financially, economically. Think about what that person brings to your life. Think about what that person has to do in contributing to your life. Because that person may then go on to be the person that really helps you move forward. So never look down at somebody. Everybody has a role to play and everybody has something to contribute. And my final story, the fourth person, let's call him Gopinath. That's my father. One of the things you would have heard from Eve during her introduction of me was that I used to work for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That was in 2010. My father and mother were visiting me in Geneva at the time. I was a young civil servant. I was just beginning to understand the big bad word. I would say good and bad, the big good and bad world of the international relations system. And I happened to just come back after a 10-day mission with the then High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillai, who was a South African of Indian origin. Her grandparents were taken from Tamil Nadu to South Africa as indentured laborers. Navi Pillai then went on to be appointed as the first Supreme Court Chief Justice of South Africa, appointed by Mandela, the first Chief Justice of color to be appointed by Nelson Mandela. She then came on to become the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, which is where I had the privilege of working with her. I'd just come back from a 10-day mission after meeting with her. And gosh, what an experience that was. I was in Mexico. We were traveling all around the country. I was with her and I was getting to see the ultimate authority on human rights right there, showing what human rights is about, explaining human rights in her language to people around her. I came back. My parents said, we want to meet her. And I said, look, let me try. Let me see if we can find a moment to meet with the High Commissioner for Human Rights, because she sits with heads of states. You don't just get an appointment to see someone like that. Anyways, I was able to, let's not go into that. I was able to introduce my parents to her at one point. The first thing that my mother had to ask her was, High Commissioner, is my son a good boy? Is he behaving well? I have to always tell my mother, Mom, this is not parent-teachers meeting. You do not have to ask that to every, a senior civil servant that you meet in the United Nations. But the point is, my father was very quiet throughout the entire meeting. As we walked out, I put my arm across my father's shoulders, around my father's shoulders, and I asked him, Dad, is everything okay? Daddy, are you fine? He said, I don't know what you think you are, but I think you're successful. I said, Daddy, what do you mean? Why do you say that? He said, I say that because all I am is a high school pass. I've only done my high schooling. I come from a small village in Kerala, and today I was able to sit and talk, thanks to my son, to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the ultimate authority on human rights in the world. But the reason I mention this is because he then went on to tell me, don't forget where you have come from. Don't forget where your father comes from. Don't take these moments for granted, because these moments are when you have to realize that you have come from a place, that is where my father comes from, a very underprivileged sort of a lifestyle. And now being able to sit there, recognizing this, gave me a much better perspective of how much more humble we must be as we take things forward. I come to that conclusion with one last point, and this is perhaps something all of you could use in your regular day-to-day lives as we encounter this world of video conferences, is this. Every time when we hear somebody speak, we finish it with this. Well, from now on, if you would like to consider this, my friends in Good Shepherd, at the end of every speech, if you really appreciated what somebody says, give a shout out to that disabled person by doing this. Because if you have a video conference and you don't want to turn your microphone on, and irrespective of when you want to turn it or not, this automatically gives a sense of appreciation for not only the disabled person, but also for people around you who have listened to you. With that, I take your leave. Thank you so much.
We can follow his instructions and shake our hands. Everyone, put your cameras on and let's shake our hands.
Sure. You muted your mic. Okay.
A big thank you to our chief guest of the day. I've heard so much about Shabri speaking, but this was out of the world. Fantastic.
Fantastic.
By far the best speech I've heard in years. Mr. Shabri Nair, we are privileged to have you in our midst. And I'm sure every single one watching today in the meet, on live stream, Facebook and Instagram, have lots to take away. You have touched every single one who's listening to today, I'm sure. For this, I must be grateful to Miss Sheila Alexander, for inviting you, so as to give all of us a chance, the opportunity to interact with you. We're very lucky to be here. I'm lucky to be here and talk and listen to you. It's amazing. Now we'll move on. We'll move on to the questionnaire. we'll move on. In yesteryears, it was teachers asking questions, as you know. Normally the teachers ask the questions, you know. Today times have changed, you know. It is students questioning to learn. Not questions, please pay attention, children. It is questions to learn, not to check out, okay? So students today ask questions to learn. So now the floodgates of questions are going to open out for the next 10 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on your interest that you have. So next 10 minutes is for questionnaire. You need to share your name and class, then pose the question. All other members need to mute their mics and allow the person to ask their question. Your time starts now. Yes, Denise.
Good afternoon, everyone, and chief guest. My name is Denise, and I'm from the 11th grade. I had a question I hope you'd answer. With the mention of a significant moment in your school life, to elaborate, how did you come to the conclusion that such a career path was the right one for you?
All right. Should we take a round of questions, or would you like me to answer each one of them? Sorry, you're on mute, sir.
So you might.
Sorry?
Each one.
One at a time. One at a time. Fine. Right. Thanks, Denise. Great job on behalf of UNODC as well. You know, I can tell you this. UNODC's office is based in Vienna. Very important secretariat role that they play for the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, for its what we call the second headquarters of the United Nations in Europe. The first is Geneva, and the second one is in Vienna. Great question. Look, I don't know if there was one such moment. I joined Good Shepherd in my 11th grade, and I was the first batch of 11th. So when we talk about 1613 and Autumn House, all of that was new for me. I was coming into school, you know, not necessarily understanding what boarding school life would be like. I think about, you know, the reason for the red tie is also Autumn House, so represent autumn. Here's perhaps one example that I can give you. I was groomed by many people when I was in the school. I was groomed by, gosh, I wouldn't be able to, you know, Sheila Miss, Anila Miss, you know, Sajni Miss. There were quite a few teachers, you know, all over the school. But there was one person in specific who recognized my ability to get into public speaking. And he really honed my skills in public speaking. He doesn't work at the school anymore, a gentleman by the name Santosh Kanavali. And Santosh sir had a unique ability in being able to link with how I presented myself. So he'd take me, he'd spend time with me, even after hours, in preparing me for the different debate competitions. I was the inter-school debate champion. I was the inter-district level debate champion from the school. I was all over the place on debates, elocutions, recitations. Perhaps one of those things that played into me, you know, getting the best all-rounder. But the reason I mention this is because there was one particular debate competition. It was held at Lawrence School, Lovedale, and we all know how much we love the Laurentians, right? I mean, they just have this ability, you know, to somehow, you know, feel that they are the best. But the reason I mentioned that is, and I now have a father-in-law who was a former Laurentian, you know, so we do have our constant debates now on Lawrence and Good Shepherd and all the other schools. And my wife went to Laidlaw in Ooty, Katy Valley. So, you know, quite a few, you know, Ooty products here. But the reason I mention this is because one of those first debate competitions that I went to with Omar Basit, Sheila, Miss, you would remember Omar. Omar and I went representing Good Shepherd to the inter-school debate competition, which was at Lawrence. It was on the 15th August anniversary, 15th August Independence Day celebrations of India. While at this, and the debate topic was, but for the British, India would not have been a nation. So ask yourself this, but for the British, India would not have been a nation. how many of you would agree and how many of you would disagree? But for the British, India would not have been a nation. And I was fervently against the topic. I was against the topic because my thinking was even if the British would not have been there, India would have been a great nation. But the reason I mention this is because that moment I had to spend time researching on Indian history. And that moment researching on Indian history, what India stands for the rest of the world, what India means for the rest of the world, really resounded with me. And I still, in a way, I still take, I'm sorry for these interruptions. I keep getting calls on my mobile. I'm taking this call on my mobile. I still remember the quote that I used in the beginning of my speech, because I could recognize that from each one of your speeches, where you start by saying something powerful and then you go into respected so-and-so. I see that in everybody's, and I remember I chose something from Rabindranath Tagore's famous poem. I won't necessarily go into the poem today, but the reason is that, those are things that inspired me to know, all right, this is where I need to go into. But just so you know, Denise, on a side note, what I can tell you is I studied to be an engineer before I did all those degrees that you guys spoke about and know of. But I'm an engineer that quit. I studied engineering and I quit it. I could never do well in school. I could never do well. So I passed out of Good Shepherd as a best all-rounder, joined engineering, and failed my classes and courses simply because I was not good enough to be an engineer. But that was the best decision that I took, was quitting engineering and then moving on to what I learned at Good Shepherd, saying, this is what I'm good for. International relations is where I should be. I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir.
Next.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Rishabh Sultania. My question to you is India justified in sending back and refusing to accept Rohingya refugees in our country?
Some of these questions are also diplomatically very sensitive, but I'm going to try and answer each one of these questions. Look, justifications depend on the people that are giving you the justifications. And this is something that you will learn in international relations. One of the things that I really appreciated hearing in somebody's opening, the remarks from one of the GA committees was that India and North Korea formed an alliance. Now, if you come and speak to the central government in Delhi and you speak to the government of India about the possibility of forming an alliance with North Korea, you're most probably going to hear somebody laugh out loud and walk out of the room, right? But the reason I mention that as an example is simply because the perspectives that a government takes is based on various different factors. I, for one, do not necessarily condemn or condone it, simply because from the United Nations side of things, I need to be able to appreciate where the government comes from. Now, this may be a diplomatic answer, but look at it in another way, which is this. Would you, if somebody came to you asking for help and said, sir, I don't have space, I'm kicked out of my house, I have a platform to sleep on, would you give me refuge in your house? You would take that decision, Rishabh, based on your circumstances. You would take that decision based on, right, I've got 4 members in a family, I've got 2 bedrooms, the 4 members need the 2 bedrooms, do I have space in my living room? Not necessarily. Should I be able to take this person overnight? Well, maybe he can sleep in the living room. If so, come on in, share our meal with us. If not, no, I'm sorry, stay out. Keep this in mind as you look forward into the international relations, if you decide to choose this as a career, because there is no right or wrong answer. The answer is who takes the most ethical decision. Personally, I don't feel refugees should be kicked out. Refugees are running from a conflict. Refugees are running from an internal strife in their country. And I think we, as a country that believes in being what do we say, Vasudeva Kudumpaka, the world is our home. And if we believe that, then we should be able to take care of everybody who comes to us asking us for our help. Thanks, Rishabh.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mangalam. My question is,
Having traveled to so many countries, which country has inspired you the most and why?
Oh, lovely. What a great question. It's always very difficult because each country comes with its own beauty, its own charm, its own perspectives. Okay. So I will mention one country, and it's not the only one. There are quite a few other countries that have had an impact in my life, and has given me stories to reflect on, to think about. But the one country that I will come to you with is a small country in the east of Europe. It's called Moldova. And if you don't know of the country, please Google. It's a small country. It's spelled Moldova, Moldova. Moldova is a country that I used to cover when I was with the Swiss government, when I was still in Switzerland at the time. And it's a country that is absolutely beautiful. Beautiful country, lovely people, and stuck between being associated to a former Soviet Union culture and wanting to now be a part of a liberal European system. Imagine being stuck in a place like that. Imagine when you get out of one little issue or situation and you're faced with another one and not knowing how to move between the two. It's so important for us. Take, for instance, today the idea of how culture affects us. How many of us want to break away from the chains of the Indian culture? The chains, I say, because we don't say that the culture is bad, but we don't want the culture to hold us back. But at the same time, we may want to think about our culture being unique to us and understanding what I mentioned earlier, where we come from. That's where Moldova is. And it's a beautiful country, but I use that story because when I have a very good friend, a Moldovan ambassador who now represents her country in the European Union in Brussels and Moldova, and she always talks about how much she's learning about the different countries. So remember this, we are once again privileged to be from India, because India is big, India is massive, very important in the global stage. When you come from a small country like Moldova, you appreciate what they bring, what little things we can learn from them. So that's one of the things that I've learned is, countries like Moldova, Comoros, as I told you about Fatima, these are countries that we should never rule out of the larger scheme of things. Thanks, Mangal.
Thank you.
We still have time for one more question. Is there anyone interested? If not, we can move on.
Why don't have a question from a teacher?
From anyone.
Anyone.
There's one question from me. Just a small quiz question. When you went GSIS and growing up, who was your model? Who was your anchor, which you really looked up to? When you went GSIS, there was an anchor, American anchor.
Oh my gosh, Larry King. I so wanted to be the next Larry King. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to have my own little show. I quit my engineering, where I was doing so badly, to then pursue something in communications and international relations, all because of Larry King. I don't know where you got that from, because
it's from
right. Interesting you say that. So yes, Larry King was I used to follow all his shows. I was one of those guys back in class where people would be like, what is he talking about? But anyway, I'll stop there. Yes, Larry King.
Thank you so much. I'll just go off the program a bit. I request Madam to say a few words, since we have one of our Shepherdians back, our family members back into our flock. Regards, Madam, followed by Sheila Miss to say a few words. Just short few lines. Then we'll go on with the program.
Good evening, Mr. Sabri. So nice to see you after a few years. I am thoroughly impressed. And I'm very happy that you have come to take part in this virtual program of ours. Every year we have it in the school, but this is the first time we are having it online. But these children are really privileged to have you and to listen to such a wonderful speech from you. We have learned a lot of things from your experience and the way you were in the school, the speeches you made in Lawrence School, and you are benefited by Good Shepherd International School. And you know about Sir.
Yes, I do.
Know about
My
Sir.
condolence.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And a few years back, we decided that instead of getting so many, people from outside, old people, we thought we will call our own alma mater to come and speak to our children, their success stories, and to give them guidance. And this is also a real, inspiration for these kids when they grow up. They can also one day come like a chief guest or come as a guest for some function and speak to our children those days, coming days. So thank you so much. I did not ask you where you are speaking from.
Currently from Delhi.
Delhi. Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Are your parents with you?
Yes, they are. And so, again, I'm very grateful that we are all together during the lockdown.
Oh, okay. So wish you all the best, Sabri. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Sheila Miss. Sheila Miss, can I have a few words from you?
Is she there?
Yes, yes. I had a small audio problem, so I had to just get out and rejoin. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Shabri. Good evening, members of the staff, members of the Academic Council, and delegates, student officers, and students of Good Shepherd International School. It's such a proud moment for a teacher like me when one of our students speak from the heart, because Shabri is what you heard. I won't say anything more about Shabri is because you heard him. And last year when he visited us during the Back to Roots program with his wife, I think he's visiting us the first time after he left school. I don't remember that. I had told him, you represent, you're an officer in the UN and playing an important role with the ILO. I would invite you to be the chief guest for one of our Model United Nations. And I had spoken to Shabri on this, and the plans overturned because of the pandemic. But I still kept this in my mind, and I wrote to Shabri and asked him if he could honor us by being the chief guest for one of the functions, either the opening and the closing ceremony. And he gracefully and graciously agreed to it. And also he put me across to Mr. Dr. Murli Thumarakudi, one of the famous personalities, a writer and a great gentleman who's doing great work with the UN right now, very active both in the global and the national and even the state with guiding the diplomats, that guiding organizations with his in his advisory capacities. So thank you once again, Shabri, for being there for us. And I'm proud of you. We were proud of you the day you stepped into GSIS. The 2 years you rocked, you were a live wire, and you are still one. And as your parent, the last story, as your father felt, we do feel the same thing today. Thank you, and God bless you, son.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila, Miss. Thank you, Mr. Shabri. Thank you so much for being with us. I'll hand the MC back his post. I did go off a bit of a track. It's emotional to have a shepherd back in our place doing so well and spoke from the heart. Secret is to speak from your heart and stand and speak. Takeaways.
That's right.
Feel the speech when you speak. Very important. Okay. Over to Abhishek Krishnan, IMC.
Thank you, Dominic, sir. Thank you, Ms. Sheila. Thank you, Elsima, ma'am. And once again, thank you, Shabinath, sir. You truly inspired us. Moving on. Coming up next is a special Maharashtrian dance performed to classical music by our middle school students. That was a great performance indeed. Now I would like to call upon our school captain boys, Devya Goenka of grade 12, to deliver the expression of gratitude.
Thank you, Abhishek. Good afternoon, all. Let me begin by thanking the chief guest, Mr. Shabrinath Nair. Sir, your insightful experience in Bangladesh have been very informative and have allowed us to appreciate what we have. You have instilled in us a spirit of resolving conflicts through unity and fair play, and taught us that change can be brought about solely through camaraderie. You made us realize that we must acknowledge our past. 2 days of thrilling debates with a showcase of talents have finally come to an end. You know what I always appreciate about GSMUNs? The memories that last a lifetime. Never would anyone have thought how quickly these 2 days would come to an end. Probably the best GSMUN since this year round, the virtual MUN has tested our boundaries and taken learning beyond the narrow confines of a Google Classroom. The skills and knowledge gained through GSMUN will one day bear rich fruit, delegates. You have picked up on so much more than soft skills and knowledge. You have picked upon of 2 days of constant happiness. A ceremony cannot end without an expression of gratitude. So here I am, thanking everyone who has made this GSMUN possible. On behalf of the school body, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our school's president, Mr. Jacob Thomas, our senior vice president, Mrs. Elsema Thomas, our principal, Mrs. Sheila Alexander, and the academic council members for transforming GSMUN from a vision to a reality. The Secgen Daivik and the Dep Secgen Mangalam have motivated everyone throughout. It had been a difficult task to bring everyone together to draft resolutions and get them passed. But I suppose nothing is impossible when it's a great team like theirs. I must thank Mr. Dominic Judehurst for coordinating the sessions and providing intellectual leadership to all the heads and co-heads. Mrs. Deeta Chandran and the GSMUN teacher coordinators were great in ensuring that every session involves a sense of engagement. I was so astonished when I first learned that the MUN would be held virtually this year. But what surprised me even more was the seemingly flawless work of the IT department in ensuring that the MUN took place. The heads and the co-heads of various committees, thank you. Thank you for being there and for being the leaders that you were to your committees. Thank you, teachers, for your constant support and, more importantly, your time. Delegates of every committee, you were amazing despite all the challenges. It was thanks to Purvash, Vishal, Rutvik, and the press team that the flag presentation, the GSMUN blog, the website, and the press releases were able to take place. Once again, thank you all for being there and for your help and dedication in this journey. Thank you.
Well said, Devya. Before we conclude today's prestigious event, I would like to invite our Secretary General, Master Devik Satisha, once again for the closing declaration of the GSMUN 2020.
Thank you, Abhishek. I now declare GSMUN 2020 closed.
Thank you, Devik. Finally, I request everyone to rise for the school anthem.
We celebrate with grateful hearts, here's to our joy and pride. In virtue's ways we forward us, into the just right Come share with tears, let's sing in thee, and while we chase our rainbow dreams, our hearts turn back to you. Oh, brightest light is you we know. Oh, God in the light, our dreams are yours. Oh, brightest light is you we belong. Oh, God in the light, our dreams are full. Please write with all his light and wisdom, God shall never be undone. Love and service are our watches, there's nothing we shall find. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, love, goodness is nurtured here. Please try for my understanding God's love is passing there. Oh, brightest light is you we belong. Oh, God in the light, our dreams unfold. Oh, brightest light is you we belong. Oh, God in the light, our dreams unfold. Good shepherd.
A big thank you to our chief guest of today, Sabri Nair, for being with us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you all heads and co-heads, all delegates for a fabulous job you have done throughout the last 2 weeks, working behind the scenes, working after class hours, working late night for recordings. Thank you once again, every one of you. Thank you, Sheila Miss, once again.
Thank you, Mr. Dominic.
Thank you, ma'am.
For working so hard
Oh,
to put everything together.
the kids are so good, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Abhishek, thank you so much.
Super job.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, all of you did a wonderful job.
He's actually my official MC.
I know.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much, sir.
You have to look at. You
Yeah.
look for looking at our chief guest. You have lots to do. Thank you very much. Adios. Thank you. We all sign off today. Thank you very much.
So Shabri has become a role model now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, teacher. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Shabri. Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you. All are waiting
Thank
for
you,
the
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Promise.